At this point, we would normally introduce our speakers, but one of them is myself. Kimber, how would you like an introduction? Would you like to?
I think most people in the room know me as well.
Oh yeah, they do.
Just because they do sit on a board with me as well. So, but if you don't know, I'm Kimber Dempsey. I also go by the Retro Realtor. I specialize in mid-century modern real estate. And so I live and breathe this, as well as sit on a board for historic Littleton, as well as Docomomo. So familiar face around these parts, and this is what I live and breathe every day. And Josh is our president and architect over at Kephart, and is also living and breathing this daily, and also has an affinity for community projects and modernism, high rises, and multifamily. So this is both of kind of our passion projects put together. And we actually gave this talk to the Historic Preservation Board in Littleton last year. A little different version than you're going to see today, because that's a little different when you're talking to a board than making it more fun for you guys to hear. So
Our thought is that since we're next door, we're actually going to go walk the project. But before we walk it, let's get a little bit of an idea of what it is we're looking at. So and this is going to be a rather informal program just based on that fact. What we're going to do is Kimber's going to talk more about Eugene Sternberg in general, who he is, big picture stuff about the project, his beliefs and ideas. Let's ask questions. Let's have a little bit of a conversation here. And then we'll actually look at the drawings, some details and some ideas that we could see on paper. And then we'll actually go over and walk the project in real life. Doesn't make sense?
yeah. So I'll go ahead and get started. So I don't know if all of you are familiar with Eugene Sternberg. We know a few people in the room that were actually able to know Gene in person. I was not, unfortunately, blessed with that. But Gene is a very unique individual because his career started over in Europe. And he was born in Czechoslovakia, and he attended Czech Technical University and studied under, I'm going to butcher this name, an architect named, actually I should probably give it to Anne to pronounce, František Libra during the summers. And he was offered a scholarship at the University of London's Bartlett School of Architecture. So he left Czechoslovakia in 1939 to go do that. And what was happening in 1939? The start of World War II. And so he was the only one out of his large Jewish family that was actually able to leave Czechoslovakia, which was a big deal at that moment. And after World War II was declared in 1939, the Bartlett School was evacuated to Cambridge, where Sternberg studied from 39 to 44, completing his architectural degree. And he had a degree in town planning and as well as his architectural degree. And this is kind of a big piece as to why we're touching on this, is that he got his training on city planning from an architect, Sir Patrick Abercrombie. And at that time, he was one of Britain's most busy and imaginative planners. And so he brought that over here to the US when he had the opportunity. And he got to rebuild war-torn cities of Europe. And so if you think about how much of a change that actually was, it's huge. And that's where his mentality really started and why we're so lucky to have ended up with him here. He ended up teaching part-time at Cambridge, and he was offered a job at Cornell. However, when he went out to Cornell, he was upset that they would not let him practice his architectural. He actually couldn't practice outside of teaching. And so he ended up getting recruited by Carl Feist, the director of the new School of Architecture that was actually over at DU. He had never been to Colorado. He had no idea what he was signing up for, but he knew that he could practice architecture while still being a professor. And fast forward to, he ends up coming to Colorado to teach at DU. And along with many of the other professors at DU, he ended up living in a butler hut. Now, when you have a family and you end up having to live in a butler hut, this isn't a great way to be. So he and a bunch of other professors got together, and I'm going to breeze over because South Dahlia Lane is a whole presentation on itself, but I'm going to give you kind of a 50-foot view of South Dahlia Lane, and I do actually want to. So this is South Dahlia Lane. This was an alfalfa field when Sternberg and the other professors found it. They decided to build on this piece of land that's roughly off Yale and Dahlia, if you're unfamiliar. So basically right where I-25 curves, this is kind of right around that corner right before you hit kind of that Evans, Colorado Boulevard, that section over there. And they decided to do a single family housing cooperative. Now, it was the first detached single family housing cooperative in the entire country. They basically were writing the rules on how do we make this happen with FHA funding while they were doing the project. They actually started breaking ground when they weren't supposed to, while they were still trying to get funding. And he ended up, this is kind of where we first get to see Sternberg's planning in action. And as you can see, he had to get a special variance for this unique stirrup-shaped street. And this is a piece that we see in all of his community projects, is this community green. And so as you can see, all the houses face inwards to this community green. We have a tennis court up here. This is not part of South Dahlia Lane, but this tennis court actually is. And there's a playground and there's an amphitheater that's actually kind of hidden by the trees. But this is community living at its finest. And this was kind of step one where he really got to practice his community mind. And so we see this repeated again and again and again in his projects, that he got to do what he wanted to do in building community through architecture. We will see a similar thing, not exactly the same, but a similar feeling in almost every single one of his projects where he creates a community space. And actually, if we go back 2 slides, Josh. This building here, the Denver Educational Senior Citizens Inc. building that is off of 13th and, do you remember the cross street, Josh? I'm forgetting right now.
Williams.
This building is an interesting one. This was for retired Denver school teachers. And what's interesting about this building, and you can't, I actually, if I should use the rendering, but if you look at these corners, this is actually a double piece of glass on the corner. So they are still floor to ceiling glass in this unit. And even though it's a high rise, this building still has community areas. On each floor, there was a community space. All these teachers talked together. They were all friends. They all knew each other. And on every floor, there was this big open space. And when people first went into the building, after it was after it had kind of stopped being used for what it was meant to.
It's no longer desk seat.
It's no longer. They were like, why is this big empty hallway here? It was actually a community space that had sofas where people could get together and gather. And it was the community space on every floor. And the fascinating part about each one of these units is that the kitchen actually had the full floor ceiling window, because many of the teachers at that time were women and they wanted a light, bright kitchen, and they maybe didn't want to leave their houses, or if they didn't have a spouse anymore, this was a way to give them a quality of living, unlike what you saw commonly in senior housing. Senior housing was a passion project for Sternberg.
Absolutely.
This is another piece of senior housing. I need to just go over, one of our friends of Docomomo, her mother lives in Kentucky Circle Village. This is actually not unlike, it's a larger version of Geneva Village, but it is also senior housing. It is still used as it was intended today, is still senior housing, and I've been in the units, and they are very simply designed, but they have floor to ceiling glass. They have not a single inch of wasted space, which is what Sternberg is known for. And when we look at his passion projects, he wanted to do community buildings. He did libraries, he did hospitals. Actually, the very first project he did out here was the medical center that was on Littleton Boulevard, that I believe Crowther had added the addition to later on, if I'm remembering correctly. So that was one of his first actual projects outside of teaching that he did out here. And when we talk about it, he really wanted you to live better and have it be truly a community. And South Dahlia Lane still functions the way he meant it to be in 51. It still lives that way today. They all have a group text. Kids roam from house to house. They all walk the lane. They all know you're not from the lane. If you walk on the sidewalks, they know you're not from the lane, because everybody who lives on the lane just walks on the lane. They have a 4th of July parade. Like, there's full function in the design. It truly does encourage the way of living. It's not just there and it happens to be that way. This senior living area also is based on a big circle, and everybody knows each other. They talk to each other, and there's a community green in between each building. It's hard to see in this photo. This was the best one, but you can see the green spaces in between and behind, and you'll see that when we go over to Geneva Village. And then we can go into talking about Arapahoe Acres, which is probably one of the projects that we all know him for being associated with. And he started by building modest houses. I believe on the very first slide, I have a picture of the first house of Arapahoe Acres. And this was the first house. It sold over asking the first weekend. This was not Sternberg's plan. He wanted everybody to afford quality architecture. So the only streets that you actually see Sternberg's work on is actually on Marion, because that was the street that got executed, and then he actually left the project. However, the planning of the neighborhood was his planning, and so when you go through those streets, you see the unique sides, and you see those curved streets versus everything else around it is on a grid. He wanted to slow people down. He thought about how neighborhoods needed to function. He knew that if you had a straight street, people would speed. If you had a curved street, people would slow down. If you had a cul-de-sac, people would not race and people would gather. Well, originally, one of the cul-de-sacs that's in Arapahoe Acres was actually supposed to be a park. It was supposed to have a green space like you see in this drawing of Geneva Village. There was supposed to be a central green space. Well, Hawkins ended up building on it. He said he was going to put a park in another location. Then the neighbors got mad because it was the very last chunk. They ended up building a house on it. Hawkins let them use the pool in Hawkins' personal backyard. So let's just say that neighborhood didn't actually get seen to Sternberg's vision, and I think if it had, it would have actually been very different. And I'd be really curious to see how much different and how much closer that community actually would even be today. They're close over there, but not as close as South Delaware Lane. And if we actually, you can go forward for me. 2 slides, I believe. What he was doing was so prominent. It was in the newspaper constantly. I did not have to dig very hard to find these articles on either. South Delaware Lane was Mile High Housing Association, just as a side note. And then we talk about how important Geneva Village was to the community over here. And if you want to go down just a couple, sorry, I had a different plan for what order we were going to do things. This is one of the other houses that he did in Arapahoe Acres. And he did something similar in South Dahlia Lane, where one of the things that Sternberg liked to do is take the same floor plan and just put a different facade or a different roof line on it so that it would feel like a different house. And this is where we kind of see this in these small houses over here. You would orient them differently, and they all kind of the same bones. And if you've been in a bunch of Sternberg's projects, you know that there's no wasted space. There's no fluff. He was not known for putting big kitchens in these things, but they function. The function is there. These are functional. These are a piece of furniture. In his mind, they were a piece of furniture that you could live in. And that's what's so important to keep in mind as we go over to Geneva Village. You'll kind of see this mastery and simplicity that are in all of his structures. This is Gene himself, and he's standing actually in front of a medical building that was over by DU. He did a lot of medical buildings. If you've driven down South Broadway, you've seen the Tri-County Health Building. That's one of his buildings too. He did a lot of community projects. I did this because here we are sitting in Littleton. Sternberg was, a lot of people call Sternberg the father of Littleton. This was Sternberg's office, and it's funny because you look at this building and you're like, well, that's pretty bright and colorful for Sternberg. We joke that he probably actually did the folded plate for insulation when snow would fall on it, and it was actually something that he wanted it to be a little jazzy for his office, but like when you see his massing on his buildings, this does read as a Sternberg. But Bemis Library is also Eugene Sternberg, as well as I didn't put one of his brutalist buildings, but his architecture, he designed it for the purpose. And he didn't just do it just because he really thought about each location, and to the point where he wanted to save and he wanted to actually be able to build something for everyone, to a point where a church came to him and said, we want more of a modern church. And they said, but we don't have much of a budget. He took down the 20s church, saved every brick he could, and rebuilt a modernist church with the same brick. Like, that was how much he really firmly believed in quality architecture that was affordable. And this is something, this was his passion. He did not want this to be something, he didn't want it to be this illustrious thing. He wanted people to live in functional architecture. And that's kind of our 50-foot view of Sternberg, because I could talk about him even more. But I do want to touch on a little bit of the...
That's a question.
Yeah.
He has another apartment project in Littleton at Stern Parkway.
Yeah, he does on Stern. Yep. And Stern, that one on Stern Parkway is actually super neat if you go by it, and it's cool at night, because when you can see all the windows lit up. I'm not a creeper, but I like to see the architecture. It's nice because it does mimic Kentucky Circle Village as well as Geneva Village over here. He had a repeated style that he liked to do, and it also has a community green in front of those as well. And so it's a repeated thing. It is definitely, this was his passion project, or projects like that. It wasn't designing custom mansions for people. That was not his passion project. So doing things for the community was the way. He didn't want to build a building that wasn't functional. But I do want to touch on Geneva Village, and let's talk about some of the floor plans. But not everybody knows about the Geneva Association because it's no longer around. So kind of when we talk about how school teachers were mostly women, we flipped the switch and we're going to go to the Geneva Association, which was mostly men. These are people that worked in the hospitality industry, people that were lifetime restaurant workers, people that were lifetime hotel workers, and anything in kind of that realm. These hospitality workers, we're gonna reel it way back. We're going back to the 20s, and it actually was started in Geneva, Switzerland. So that was established because if you think about it, all of these hospitality workers were sitting in smoke-filled buildings at the time. If you think about what were people doing in hotels, in restaurants at that time, they were smoking. What was also prevalent at that time? Tuberculosis. So they started this Geneva Association as a way that you could pay in each year to have basically the right to go travel, to go to these places that were part of the Geneva Association. So when we walk over, we're going to also point out Geneva Lodge, which was the first landmark in Littleton, thanks to the 2nd century fun. And that lodge was the original lodge for the Geneva Association. And the way that that building is designed for people who had tuberculosis and other respiratory issues to help when they came here, because we were commonly known as a place to come recover from tuberculosis. Our altitude and being able to sleep in the open air, all of those things helped. And we had a lot of buildings throughout Colorado that had some unique architecture due to trying to recover from it. We had a lake over there where the city building is now, was part of like an outdoor area where they could enjoy themselves. It was like kind of going on a vacation and getting to rehab. So fast forward to, we got a cure for fall. We learned how to treat tuberculosis, and we kind of didn't need it as a rehab facility anymore. But you know what we did need? We needed more retirement housing. Well, they could have about 8 or 9 single individuals retire in the lodge, but they didn't have any areas for the wives to live. So the whole point of originally building Geneva Village was for the wives and people with partners to be able to live in a retirement community. And obviously they didn't have benefit plans. They didn't have any of that. And so this was the way for them to actually be able to retire. And so the original intention was to build this retirement community for those people that were part of the Geneva Association. And this is where restaurateur Mark Hummel, who actually owned a couple German restaurants in Denver, one it being in Cinderella City, helped to fund the buildings over there at Geneva Village. And so that's kind of like the light story, and he wanted to recruit because he knew that this was Sternberg's passion. He came in and designed the project, and that's what we still have today. And Littleton ended up as an owner, and it was being used as senior housing. And this is where we kind of get in the tricky part, where next thing that's going to happen is that's probably going to be redeveloped, and we're going to lose a fantastic project. But I'm going to let Josh step in because he's got some of the architectural drawings, and I want him to talk a little bit more from the architect's perspective on the project and the way it was designed. It's a worth.
What we're going to see over there is really an intact project. I mean, we're talking original colors. As far as I know, most of the interior of it is or was still original. I saw when I just walked it, some of it's being gutted right now. There's no trespassing signs, so we're probably going to stick to the street. So it's really heartbreaking to see something that's going to go away that is legitimately important. I got small drawings here, so we can slide in to see a little bit closer if that makes sense. But I think this rendering probably tells the whole story. This idea of somebody rebuilding war-torn Europe, and a really, really passionate man. I'm sure as you know, right, interviewing him, right, talking about right, just what a heavy individual. I like to think of this as kind of like mom and dad modern. Huge, big, modernist ideas, big ribbon windows, floor-to-ceiling glass, everything is a big plane, big, deep overhangs. There's these big picture modernist ideas. But when you look at this, you can imagine mom and dad living there. This isn't Richard Neutra. It's an approachable modern architecture. And that's very much by design. A lot of the other communities that he did, they were a bear to get built. You think, my God, who was put down having senior housing next to them in the late 50s? But they did. Some of the projects that Kimber showed took years to find a site that they could build that on because nobody wanted that near them. This was a wonderful opportunity to build a high-quality project that does have a sort of a higher level of finish to it than some of his others. He also wrote the book, one of the earliest books on senior housing, Eugene Sternberg's Community. I can't remember the name of the book, but he wrote it with his wife, Barbara. It's about that. And it talks about these ideas of what do we do with seniors? Where do seniors go? At this point, our country is changing, right? It used to be that folks lived in your house and, we all lived on the farm and we never really moved that far away, but things changed so much. Seniors needed to be part of the action, not put away on a farm someplace. Students could be pulled into these places with, beauty shops holding events like this. Community events could be held in these. It was a bigger picture idea. It was as much about the thinking of architecture as the actual buildings of it and the drawings. So that's the project that we're going to walk. And if we look at it here in plan, this is the landscape plan. I should have brought an easel here. We can see here villages, right? Geneva Village Circle, Kentucky Village Circle. They're villages, European villages with an icon, a steeple, something to congregate to. If this project had been built today, it would have a t-shirt, and on the front of the t-shirt would be that steeple, that clock tower, right? That's the icon of the project. It's put in the middle of it. You notice here in the site plan, there are rather large trees. And even in the original photographs, you can see here, this is one of Sternberg's own photos of the project when it was completed. No grass, no landscaping put in, but fully developed trees. This project is built around developed trees. That's something interesting. It's kind of got a built-in age to it. And you can see this street coming through. We get a whole village over here, a neighborhood in the greater. We get another neighborhood over here. Houses are not aligned with the street. Why might we do that? Again,
Privacy.
privacy.
Safer.
All of a sudden, this doesn't feel like much of a grid, right? There isn't a straight wall of buildings, right along, built to the setback, there we go. They're sort of eased in different directions a little bit. It feels like a cluster of little homes that all speak the same language. What's also not drawn in here, and it says not in contract, is the lake and how this whole end of the site faces the lake, and this faces sort of an internal kind of court.
And I'll add, Mark Hummel wanted the German tower, and that's because he had the German restaurant, so that was his contribution. The German club tower was because of Mark Hummel.
And apparently, this is very loosely based on some tower that he knew as a kid. Off the top of my head, I don't remember what one.
I couldn't find anything in that stretch, but
In the construction documents, also, the tower was changed when it was built. This is not what was in the CDs. It's slightly different. It's not that far off, but it is slightly different. And it was drawn in a different location. Ultimately, the tower got built in the parking zone to the right, closest to us on that side. It was intended to be on the other side of the street axis, which is kind of interesting. Let's see what else we got. The buildings themselves, right? We'll look at the exterior and then we'll jump into the plans. This mom and dad modern. Big expanses of glass, floor to ceiling. It's very efficient though. Everything's built with 2x4s, right? They're not store-bought windows, and this is 1964. Arguably, it would have been cheaper to have bought an actual unit that you could plug in, but it must not have made sense here. They're basically studs with glass set into them on stops, and then operable windows, and I believe they're steel casements. The rest of the project is brick, and it's two different colors of brick, which limits the amount of one color that you need. On his what's the other thing you want to call it?
Kentucky Circle Village?
Kentucky Circle Village has a lot of buildings. It's a larger project. Each one of the buildings is a different color brick, and then a few of them are actually mixed brick. As part of a savings for the outfit that was building this, the Presbyterian Church, the buildings are all built with seconds, or they're end lots of brick mixes, right? So they're discontinuing that color. And Gene's, this is okay, we'll do this in the blonde brick or the one with the black speckles, all to reduce cost. This is a real modern master here that's getting involved at a construction level that I think is really something pretty special. The plans, as far as the units. Sternberg said, if you can develop a plan with no hallways, that's a good plan. These don't really have hallways.
Most of them were like studio apartments or 20 bedroom. And they're small, by our standards, they're small.
Yes, absolutely. We're looking at,
Seniors are very happy there.
he doesn't have total square footages here underneath the plans. But they are rather small. 8-foot kitchens, 8x6 kitchens. 5x6 baths. Actually, no, they're 5x5. There's no sink in them. The sink is pulled out into a dressing room. You've kind of got this really elegant program, almost like a block of furniture that floats in this brick volume. That's pretty nice. Sets up a nice sense of entry here. So you're not just dumped straight into the single living room, right? And that's our studio unit. Then we've got the 2 beds here. There's sort of a private thing happening that goes around this kitchen pod. Then the 1 beds are the same floor plan, but with the hallway deleted. So that's pretty nice. Very elegant. And you've got a completely open kitchen that can be closed off with 40 dividers. Very simple, very elegant. This was what it was about. It wasn't this big, showy kind of architecture. Really humble. So, are there any questions before we head over and actually experience this stuff? Also to point out is, we'll look at it on site, this. So this is the dedicated outdoor community space. That's very important to the situation. There's also covered outdoor zones all along the exteriors with columns coming down into dirt. They were never paved. Weren't supposed to be paved. All of these outdoor amenity spaces for gathering.
Was there just one of those, or was there one of those on the end of each building?
There's only one of these for the community. It seems awfully small, but I would guess based on what the program was, that was including the original building as sort of an amenity center.
It was an amenity center. That's where they had their dinners, and that's what he said to Kobe. In a lodge. Yeah, the lodge was the amenity center, because that's where they would have the chefs. And keep in mind, a lot of these people that work for the Geneva Association were chefs at these restaurants and things. So they actually would try and bring in the local produce that Littleton produced. And they would have the chefs that worked at some of these 5-star restaurants cooking them meals in their retirement or their recovery, or while they'd work here to relax and be on vacation and them enjoy the lake. They actually got to enjoy it, in a different way than we even think. And that's what the Geneva Association in itself is so unique, that I think it contributes to the project. And if you see where the city center is now, that was all part of the land. I mean, they really had this big, great space, and they grew vegetables over there. They did everything. It was a wonderful space for everybody to experience. And so if you think about retiring on this land, you have your big vintage clubhouse, you have your wonderful, basically small houses that are your apartments, and you get to live with the community that worked like you did for your whole life.
And you have a lake.
And you have a lake. And then you also had downtown Littleton steps away to go enjoy restaurants and stores and everything that was over here. And I think I do just want to highlight that Sternberg's mentality with these 4 quotes that I found of his. It's good architecture in your community is as important as good medicine. Physical environment, if well planned, will enrich your whole life. And I think that's like a perfect example. These really just show his mentality, and I think anchor us. Architecture is an expression of our way of living. Our children will judge us not by the cars we drove in 1956, but by the buildings we created. To complete human being, beauty is an essential part of living. A world without beauty is unsatisfying as a world without justice. So he did want to create community and beautiful spaces, even albeit simple. The challenge to architects in Colorado is to create homes and communities as soul-satisfying as the natural beauty of mountains and plains. So he wanted to incorporate the natural environment. I think that's one of my biggest laments about what is probably going to happen to this. It's no longer going to be a beautiful site that was taking in Colorado's area. It's going to be built up. And I think we could make it denser without losing those buildings and without losing the community. But it's almost impossible to ever recreate this community again with anything we do. So, kind of on that note, I think we walk over there, not to make it depressing, but
One other point to look at before we leave. The efficiency.
Notice that there's no gutters on these buildings except for red doors.
That just
There's just a little hangar at 3 feet of gutter there. Beautiful, right?
nothing to clean out then.
The scale of the buildings too. Notice the height of these doors. Notice the height of the exterior walls. We're drawn at 7'6". We had 7'6" ceilings. It's human scale. It's the scale of a person. Why do we need this big volume? Let's use it in places that matter. 2-bedroom units have 9-foot ceilings.
So, Geneva Village, right? This is our big picture modernism in a mom and dad package. It's friendly. Look up and down the street. See those little turns that we saw in the site plan? Look how successful that is. All of a sudden, it's got a soft edge to the street. It's not this hard building wall. It's got some softness to it. It feels like a home. The scale, right? Look how little this is. It's people scale. Look at these big monsters with 9-foot ceilings, right? That's not people scale. This is friendly. I think that's magical. The icon, right? It was moved in the site plan. We saw it built where the signage is on the left. Ultimately, I assume 2 parking spaces got lost and it came on the right. It's a better spot for it. Now, both halves of this community can appreciate it. It's not sort of all one-ended. So let's go in and we'll experience these community greens. That's the original lodge.
Oh, that is. Thank you, Josh. That would have been my guess.
Like, we actually have our monthly historic Littleton meetings in there at the city building now.
Cool.
What's gonna happen? That's the real question. It's gonna get redeveloped, we just don't know how. It's going to remain some sort of affordable housing, but they haven't explained exactly how it's going to work, nor have they really decided. We're trying to still influence in a positive way.
The tower with the benches around it. Right? The base is right. The base matches the drawings. The tower was slightly changed though. It does, the top of it's a little bit different what ended up getting built. And I assume it was built to something that he approved ultimately. But you can feel it, right? This is the church steeple. This is the icon at the end of the street. It's the icon at the end of the village green. This is it. Everything else can be really quiet and really simple. This is the thing that has some power to it, the big monument. I think that's pretty neat. I understand that at one time it had chimes.
Well, and they maintain the seating around folks, even though they moved it, and that's very, very European. When every town has its own top tower, and around the base is always seating for the community. That's where you go.
Did everyone hear that? This is the place. This is picturing a European village. This is the place. There would be a fountain here. There's a clock tower. It's the place. It's the gathering place. Directly adjacent to it here is the covered outdoor gathering space.
I don't know, they were giving them until mid-year to all get moved out. I don't know if anybody's still here.
So look at the scale of this, right? When we look at it, none of this looks particularly large, but it really isn't. This is little. It's scaled down. It's people scale. We can see the height of our exterior walls. They're that 7'6" that we saw. They're not full 8 feet. The 2-bedroom units have the raised plate. So they've got a little more volume, they're a little larger. So their ceiling is appropriately scaled for their width. In these units, the spaces are smaller. You don't want to live in a tall, skinny thing. You want to live in something that is spatially scaled appropriately. So the ceilings are a little lower. Also notice how we get covered walkways between the units. There's this shared idea that you can get to know your neighbor, right? When this, as many of you know, seeing this as it was before, this was full of lawn chairs, right? It was a community green with the homes facing it. If you go to the other senior project, Kentucky Village Circle, you'll still see that. Many greens lined with lawn chairs, and they congregate, they come out here, they participate with each other. So if we go beyond just the architecture and the bricks and mortar, and you talk about the longtime residents that lived here, that says it all. They chose to live here for a reason, because the quality of life was something.
I'm kind of surprised they put the streets in the center. Like, it goes kind of the valley side, rather than like more than like an alley side with like green.
Your question was, the question here was why the street down the middle rather than maybe backloading it? There's an honesty in how you approach a building, right? Today, we want to hide the cars because we hate cars and all kinds of stuff. At that time, we're living honestly. How did we all get here? Did anybody walk here? Did anyone walk here from anywhere, even down the street? No, we drove here in a car. That's how we got here. So there's an honesty in, look at how many old modern houses you've got the carport, you pull right up, you throw her in park, you hop out and you walk 6 feet and the front door is in the carport, right? The car was new. And especially seniors that were living here in 1964, when they were kids, it was the horse and buggy days. These people are living on the moon from the future, you know? What an exciting community. You can picture this lined with a bunch of spaceships, right? In this European village. There's kind of a magic to that, I think.
Do people own here or do they rent?
They rented here for
Even as
City of Littleton owns it.
and they're gonna be
It's
charged
up for redevelopment, yeah, and they haven't decided exactly what's gonna happen. We gave this stuff to the Historic Preservation Society.
Let's walk a little further down.
We're trying to rescue it. I don't know if there's any hope. I actually never noticed that they had stations on the
It's for one person. Yeah.
I've walked by like for one person.
Yeah.
And so, and 2x4, that's an help yourself. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I like this. I mean, it was luxurious enough.
And most people's buildings are this area, a lot of GIs come down.
But it's right out of the city.
Only the ones on the outside. They got the windows.
I guess there's no light to pass
I was
through.
gonna say for natural light, yeah, clear story makes sense.
Yeah, and those are on the exterior walls.
Which a lot of those actually.
So everybody just don't creep into the one that does have someone still living in it over here.
So this was built when now? About 1960.
I do not know. Josh would know.
So when Arapahoe Acres it was built out by Kimber. But when did he start Arapahoe Acres?
49.
49.
They're celebrating 75 this year.
I know this one guy who lived I ran into he and his wife at a gallery recently. You know, he had bought his, he was saying, they just sold and moved. He said, we bought out for 200,000 and sold for 1.7.
Sternberg wouldn't be happy, that's for sure.
So gang.
But they were happy.
Are these the bigger units, the 2 bedrooms?
The taller ones are the bigger ones.
Yeah. I wonder why he didn't build more, because I understand 28 units, and that's what a noisy
That's
here.
probably at that time all this based on typical density of that period. Today, yeah, I mean, even if Gene was doing this today, this would be 4-story center.
Or it could have even been a desky today, like a tower.
Yeah. What's kind of neat over here, gang, is, you know, we have the big green at the other end on the other side of the road, the clock tower, but we get a view of the lake over here. The other functional components of this is mail and laundry. We didn't see laundries in any of those unit plans, right? So each end of the community has a laundry center, and that's that last door over there at the end. With a full piece of glass in it. Which I'm sure today is a bit of a, or was when this was still operating, was a bit of a tangle with six machine rooms.
Nice. Yeah, we're cattle down. So beaver dead end privacy.
Also, you notice in the pavement underneath these columns is not original. So these were not intended to be front porches necessarily. They're just sort of roof overhangs. Those also occur on the taller units. Why might the overhangs be a little deeper on the taller units?
They have higher roofs, or higher ceilings.
They have higher ceilings.
The noise.
Light. Solar control. Right? I guarantee water has never touched these walls. Sunlight really doesn't touch those walls either because of the depth of the overhang. So you get sort of a solar kind of thing that happens. I mean, honestly, when you open up that door, it barely clears the fascia on the roof overhang. That's incredible. I don't know if the program was intended to have, you know, if that was a place you could do plantings or something. I don't know what it's meant. But I think it's interesting that he's planting columns. You can see here the original stoop was still in place here. So this is all the pavement that we actually have. That's for next door. Definitely. The scale of everything, even as far as the members, right? Everything is just the bare minimum that we absolutely need. These 4x4s. The headers carrying the rafters, they're only 4x4s, but they're on 6-foot centers. So we're using smaller materials, reduces costs, reduce labor. It's safer to put together. Everything's just little, like a people. And how incredible it must be being in those units, as small as they are, with a full wall of glass. The whole end of that living room is glass on both sides. all of a sudden your living space stretches all the way out to the ends of the eaves. It's got to be a great experience.
It is curious to me that if affordable housing is such an issue, then why not just renovate this and keep it as affordable housing?
It would be pretty expensive to renovate.
And it's not dense enough, frankly.
It's not,
They
well,
need to get way more units.
not dense enough, but even structurally, it's not adequate because it would have to brought up energy codes. It's single glazed, it probably doesn't have any insulation.
Yeah, it's a problem all of us who own mid-century modern homes are going to be facing.
All of Harvey Park is the same way.
The city is coming for us.
Yeah,
I'm sure they will sooner or
And the
later.
city's coming for your building sooner than us.
Oh, yes.
Energize Denver, they're getting sued for that right now.
Are they?
Yeah, but it's a commercial entity that's suing them.
Really?
They all go down, but parents are
I would assume it's not the city because the city
Yeah, I don't think
doesn't
that
have
right.
motivation yet.
Oh, yeah, well, the city wouldn't sue it.
Right.
She got it at 99 and a half. 5 years.
We can see the clock tower with its lights on. Makes it a pretty neat show.
There you go.
And also, of course, without trees and without those townhomes across the street, this has a pretty nice mountain view. What's so neat to me about it is that this is and what's surprising, if you go home and look at the photos you took here tonight, they're all going to be bad. This is a very, very difficult project to photograph because you can't capture the spaces. It's hard to photograph. You look at the picture and you'll be like, oh, well, yeah, that's just kind of a building. All right.
It's very true. I've tried
It's
many
hard.
times and it fails. The only thing you can get a good photo of is the clock tower.
I think
do
it's
like in this circle too is one of the places where you see the different, more so than even down there, where you see the 2-unit, the 2-bedroom unit has the blonde brick and then the red brick, and you see repeated blonde brick, red brick. So you do see that in this whole circle, and I'm sure that that was actually more intentional that he did do the 2-tone on these buildings, whereas a lot of those are all the same tone in the 2-bedroom and the 1-bedroom.
How many units are here?
There are 28 buildings, but there are, is it buildings or units? I wanted to see. I think it's, yeah,
It goes to
it's 28 units.
Is the number on the door, that one. And it starts at 1 here, and it looks like it goes clockwise. So it looks like 29.
Maybe. I
If
thought
the
there were,
numbering is consistent.
One of them might be wrong.
I think one is,
might
yeah,
have
I was gonna say, I'm pretty sure there is 28 buildings or units. I'm gonna say it's units. Because I know I saw that pulling up some of my research, but. And if you think about it, if you have 2 bedrooms, or half of those units, and then the studios, it did house a decent number of people for the space, really. It wasn't as dense as what we want to build now. but it still was a dense space in a not a large amount of space, especially for the time when we think about the American dream was building your single family home on a quarter-acre lot. This would have been considered dense. We didn't have as many, we really didn't have condos. We had apartments, and they were downtown. For down here, this was a dense project, because the only other spot we see apartments really in Littleton that were the age of this is over behind the King Soopers, kind of down on Gallup and on, when you see behind on Bannock, it's really the only other spot in this area that we see big multifamily buildings. So this would have been a dense complex for when it was built, because everything else was, you know, you had Aberdeen Village, it was almost half-acre lots. You have Broadmoor, which was mostly quarter-acre lots. That's everything was on large spaces. So if you think about it, this would have been a dense community.
So a little history. We started out as renting. When did Littleton Housing Authority come?
So Geneva, it was when Geneva Association went away, Littleton purchased it. There was a rumor that it was purchased that it only could stay as senior affordable housing. Now there's been debate about in the city whether it has to stay senior, that there was a deed restriction, is what it sounded like. When the city council have been talking, they're saying affordable housing is what has to be here. But it was my understanding that this land was deeded to be affordable senior housing very specifically. Now they're saying it got lost in the middle. There's a lot of opinions. But
So how much were they going for
rent? I mean, up until now, I think they were under $1,000 for a unit.
Like 300.
Yeah, I mean, it was cheap, like really cheap.
253.
Yeah, really.
Wow.
I think the
30
most,
years.
I think the most expensive unit in here was like $400. Was it only 300? Everybody seemed to have a different opinion when I had asked. But,
When did they all leave?
well, we still have. You were saying we still have
one residence.
at least one
Oh,
resident.
is that right?
I think the unit that's down that
I
way.
think there's two.
And there were,
one here?
what was it, 6 or 7 people that moved out in March?
The last two was moved out.
Yeah.
And we helped them move. We found places, helped them move in. We had a social worker that worked with them, really tried to help. And they seem to be really happy with their transition. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that would be the one thing, and they keep going back to, is we're talking about the way that people have lived for many, many years, and we're talking like, oh, your place is just not going to be here, and how do you deal with that? And it definitely, the community members, it was hard. If you came over here and you had more than like 3 people, they were like, oh, are you coming to like, and I'm like, no, I want to save it. So if you just told them you wanted to save, they would usually let you come walk it. But it was definitely, they were on edge. Anytime anybody would come on the property that they didn't recognize. And of course, if you live in a community like this, you're going to know everybody who lives here. You'll see the stranger danger. Just like on South Dahlia Lane. People on South Dahlia Lane know me, but they'll know as soon as you're on there, like, oh, you're not a neighbor in here. What are you doing over here? So, you know, that's the beauty of the communities. Everybody does know everybody and watches out for everyone.
And that's what he designed. He designed communities. The buildings are quiet. They're a background to a community. It's like an Eames plastic shell chair. You see them everywhere. It's one of the best designs of the 20th century. You don't even notice it. That's the best work. The stuff you don't notice. And I think this epitomizes just that.
This isn't going to remain. Is it going to be raised?
This is what I imagine
They
happening
haven't
here all the
decided.
time, is it would just be a
We
bunch
don't
of
know what it's going to look
people
like.
just coming out and
My hope, and I know we're
That's what happened
our
in
hope
our
is that at least a couple of
cul-de-sac
units get saved in the lockdown.
all the moms from the
I'd love
cul-de-sac
this
to
whole
go
circle
out
to
at
get
this
saved.
time
This,
of night
like,
and
at
stand
least
and
this
talk.
chunk, but I don't know.
Or we kids to get out and
So,
play dodgeball or hide and seek, you know.
I'd love to
Because
save
we
the
were
whole
just
project,
everybody
because
on
I
the
think if you get rid of
cul-de-sac,
any of the project,
and
you
all
do
us
lose the
kids were
entire
about the same
success of the
age,
project.
4 or 5
And I
years
think that's the
difference,
challenge.
maybe.
I wish we could save the
And,
whole thing just because
yeah,
it's such a
now
high level
everybody's
thinking of
just in
architecture.
their own little place. And we do know our few of the things, but
Our next door neighbors that way and two around.
I mean, I'm sure all that stuff still functions fine, and I don't, like, honestly, that's just amazing.
Totally missed that.
I mean, yeah, like, not just, yeah, to rehab this really, I mean, it would be cheaper to rehab these than to build.
So the balance we have is preservation and a better higher use for more people, especially if we're more biggies here. They want us good. So, but yeah, this is
like she was saying, like that is.
Actually walk back down here, you can see that the city building is actually right down here, and they have to be the lodge, so this is like our main anything, just a moment. And we have this brilliant little hotel reside. So we have two of Colorado's biggest who have architecture right next to I want to say Rick was one. I want to say it was 70s. If you see here all the corners, that's
Does anyone want to look at the lodge?
Kimber might know.
Let's look at the lodge.
So they took it over in 26, and it actually was a farm prior to, so it had chickens and all the things. So this whole piece of land that we're on, parking lot, all of this, was all a farm, which Littleton was our agricultural hub. Littleton's actually a pretty old city. If we go down to the end of Littleton Boulevard, we have buildings as early as 1870. We provided ice cream, all of the wheat to Denver. We were the stop on the railroad down here that was one of the only stops before Colorado Springs to supply the city. And so this was our agricultural hub. And when Geneva Association decided to come in, they converted this from a farmhouse into the lodge and put on the addition on the back so that they had more room for people to stay in. And so all of this would have been open land when it was just the lodge, and it all belonged to the lodge. This got developed, and at that time when that got developed, I believe in the 70s is when this got sold to the city. Rick might be able to correct me on that. Yeah, you might be. Yeah, I was gonna say.
That's 74.
And so when they stopped using it as Geneva Association, that's when that got put in.
Good.
Oh, we can go in the lodge.
All the windows will be replaced in this building soon.
Just glass or the whole unit?
All the glass, the big grant from the state of
with historical preservation.
Yeah, so we got a what?
But it's mainly the solarium. Windows.
Yeah, so here's where we live. So that's a nice street. Yeah. It was on
My first solo scene was just Joshua Brooks. Then I just got it. I had
The Sternberg project over there. This building isn't shown in any of them.
I noticed that when you were showing them.
And I wonder if at that point, they were thinking that this would go away.
Well, it was sort of a philosophy of demolition by neglect. It was only used for storage
for at least a decade. No repair, no nothing, just stored stuff in there. But it has been landmarked and was rehabbed significantly with Fisher & Fisher Architects. They have their offices here for over 20 years.
Oh, wow.
Fisher & Fisher